We set up the Toward a Safer World initiative because during the last 6 years we've seen that a variety of different groups have come together to work on pandemic preparedness. Governments, civil society, scientific groups, businesses, international organisations, associations, media groups, all decided that at various times they wanted to get involved in preparing for pandemics. And we noticed this was most likely to happen within countries and within communities. And what we wanted to do was to see whether or not there were lessons from this movement of organisations that were working for a safer world in the event of an influenza or other pandemic, whether there were lessons that could be learnt and then applied for future pandemic preparedness work. I think we realised that in the modern world, you don't have single top-down programs to deal with hazards or threats to human welfare. Basically what happens is that groups of individuals and organisations come together and work together for common goals and for well-being of people. And so instead of seeing them working under the command of one international or one national authority, we see instead that they work more as a looser network or movement. And it was that recognition that made us feel, well, perhaps we need to understand how this movement has come together, how it's worked, what's driven it, what lessons can be learnt from it. And that's what the initiative is about. Now, I think that there are similarities, quite honestly, between what's happened on pandemic preparedness and what's happening on preparedness for other kinds of disasters. It's just that the difficulty with pandemic is that it's such an unknown. You never know when a pandemic is going to come. You never know how severe it's going to be. You never know how long it's going to last. But what we do know is that it's not a quick, single, instant crisis like an earthquake. It's something that lasts almost certainly for several weeks or months, and it's something that will move from country to country. So for that reason, we have to be kind of getting on top of the specific lessons of these long-running, unpredictable kinds of disaster. And then perhaps we can apply that to other kinds of disaster that we're going to be seeing more and more of in the future. Disasters associated with changing climate, disasters associated with long-term political uncertainties that need that kind of longer-term thinking and action. And you see, in the Towards a Safer World initiative, we've grown to understand that by bringing different groups together, we need unusual and novel forms of organisation to ensure that proper work is done, to ensure that the essential elements of preparedness are in place. We need to do simulations, we need to understand who is essential for the continuity of the operations of any organisation, and we need to be ready to bring together different groups so that we've got what we call the whole of society approach, which involves a range of different sectors of government and a variety of stakeholders. I mean, when we talk about whole of society approach, I must stress that that's not any kind of formula. What we're basically saying is that there is a role for all sorts of different groups in the preparedness process. Some of them being traditional bits of government like civil defence or emergency services, or parts that are concerned with emergency preparedness, the military and so on. But we're also saying that religious leaders have a role to play, that neighbourhood organisations have a role to play, that school teachers and schools have an important role to play. And we would like also to see the whole of households involved, with children and women, mothers, participating fully, because often they are the most involved when a disaster strikes. They provide immediate care to their friends and neighbours, and they have a really important role, and that role needs to be taken into account. We've learnt a lot from the last 5 years of pandemic preparedness. Most importantly, that if you're adopting a whole of household and whole of society approach, also at the same time you need to be sharing experiences with and listening to communities as they themselves prepare for pandemics and other kinds of disasters. And by sharing, I mean understanding how they view risks, how they seek to respond to risks, so that instead of having a group of people in senior positions who simply state, this is what you've got to do, do it. Instead we're saying, how do you see the challenges you face? What's appropriate in your view for a response? And then working together, so it's a partnership between society and specialists in getting the right kind of response. And we also clearly understand the importance of simulations and learning from how it is we work together. We also understand the absolute need for finding ways to help people see value in coming together and working together, not just in the early stages of preparedness, but also in the longer term, because quite often it's easy to bring people together first time, but it's much harder to hold them together. So in June we're going to be asking ourselves, what's particularly special about the pandemic preparedness experience? How has it proved to be useful so far? In addition, how can we sustain that so that we continue to be pandemic ready, even though we will be experiencing often what are quite moderate or mild events and not need to deploy the full capacities of our readiness? But still, how can we sustain it? And what lessons can we learn that can be applied to other forms of disaster preparedness? And then how can we embed that thinking and action in future movements for preparedness at country level? How can we involve local level leaders? How can we engage with different actors at local level so that they too can sustain this effort? Because in the end, sustainability means having groups in society that are prepared to invest in getting ready for pandemics or other kinds of disasters without necessarily having to do it all through some kind of centrally directed and determined program. In the end, what matters is people themselves being empowered to prepare for any kind of potential crisis or disaster, particularly a health-related crisis or disaster. People who are then supported to do so through different statutory bodies, people who are helped to work together in a very constructive way. Who should come to work with us on this? Well, in June we'll be meeting together to discuss what lessons we've learned. In June we would like to have practitioners who've worked at country level, regionally or globally on these issues to share their experience. In June we would also like to have people who are committed to ensuring that the world and individual communities in our world is prepared for any kind of potential disaster, so they too can understand what we've experienced through pandemic preparedness work. I hope we'll see you there. Thank you.